They don't have enough money. They also have don't understand the basics of the financial issues, and that leads them to make decisions that rob them of cash flow. And without cash flow, you can't succeed. You can't stay in business.
Yo, what's happening, people? Welcome back to Catch the Zenith. My guest today is Bo Burlingham. Bo Burlingham is a legendary business journalist, former editor-at-large at Inc. magazine, and contributing writer at Forbes. Starting a business today is both easier and harder than ever. Founders have more tools and advice, yet often overlook the basics like cash flow, culture, and knowing what to say no to. Bo has spent decades studying the rare founders who get this right, as told in his classic book, Small Giants. Get ready to learn what most founders get wrong in 2025, the story behind his connection with Tim Ferriss, why profit isn't a dirty word, what Bo learned from 55 years of marriage, how to keep your company's mojo, how to get employees to think like owners, why some founders regret selling, what happened with Clif and the Body Shop, what open book management really means, plus a lot more. And if you're new here, I'm Nicola, a 27-year-old entrepreneur, and on this podcast I share my mistakes, what I'm learning, and insights from the people I interview. Expect episodes on high performance and business. And as a thank you for tuning in, I've spent 4 months putting together a curated list of the 100 plus most interesting and impactful podcast episodes I've ever listened to. All from other shows, not mine. You will also get my top 10 all-time favorites, plus my best picks on wealth, health, and relationships. Just click the link in the description to grab the list for free and get signed up to my newsletter as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show. What do most people get wrong about starting a business in 2025?
They don't have enough money. They also don't understand the basics of the financial issues, and that leads them to make decisions that rob them of cash flow. And without cash flow, you can't succeed. You can't stay in business.
Why do they don't understand the financials?
Well, they just don't, because basically they're motivated. People are motivated by an idea. They get excited about an idea, about about a business that they think has a possibility of flourishing, and that there's a market for. And so they become sales oriented, and they, if they're right, they find customers who are willing to pay them for whatever it is that they provide, and they, uh, they're happy about that, and uh, they they do more and more of what um, of what they've set up to do, and eventually they need to hire other people, and there's a whole series of things that have to go on in order to get the business going, and they may not know how it all fits together. In particular, they don't know people. Nobody starts out being an accountant, and nobody really wants to be an accountant, except for accountants, I suppose. The result is that they don't know what to charge for uh, for their service. Uh, they don't know how the other costs fit into it. They don't know whether or not they're making money or they're not making money. The result is that they get into trouble, and that often happens. I uh, wrote a book with a guy serial entrepreneur who I'd been uh, writing a column with for Inc. magazine. Inc. magazine is an American business magazine for entrepreneurs. Norm and I had a column called Street Smarts in which we talked about various issues that came up. And we eventually wrote a book that is available. It was originally called The Knack, but that was a little too obscure for most people. So we changed the name to Street Smarts. And if you read that book, you will see the first part of that book is all about learning to understand cash flow. That is, nobody thinks of that when they start the business as being critical to, they know they need money in order to start the business. What they need more than money to start the business is enough money going forward that allows them to pay all their bills. And they get confused about the money that they're bringing in and how they're spending it, and it can result in a lot of problems for them.
You also talked in one of your books about profitability. Now, how would you define profitability, and what do people get wrong about it?
Well, profitability is, people get lots wrong about profitability. Somehow profit has gotten a bad name, which is ridiculous. Profit is simply something that a business has to have in order to continue being a business. If you don't have profit, you don't stay in business very long. Profitability, it depends on the kind of, there's different kinds of profit. There's gross profit, which is the difference between what it costs you to create something and what you bring in by selling it. And then there are all the expenses that you have to take out of that, and in order to uh, achieve net profit, um, and or operating profit, as 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 you may call it. And you have to have uh, basically what you need to have. If profit delivers cash, it's a way of measuring the amount of cash that you're bringing into the business. But if you don't have profit, you don't stay in business. You don't have cash flow. You can't pay your bills. And uh, I don't know how it is in Switzerland, but in the United States, if there are three people or three entities that say they haven't been paid by you, they can force you into bankruptcy. And if you go into bankruptcy, there's a period where you have a chance to sort of turn things around and, pay off people who need to be paid in order for you to continue in business. And, if you can't do that, then you wind up going out of business. It's as simple as that. There are different stages of bankruptcy. There's Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which gives you some time to reorganize. It's protection from creditors. And there's Chapter 7 bankruptcy, where you basically go out of business. And you need to understand that. It helps to understand that in your when you start your business and as you run your business. So I don't know if that answers your question, Nicola, but if not, ask me another.
Yeah, of course, of course. No, that absolutely answers my question, and it's kind of similar in Switzerland as well. You have those different phases when you struggle to with your profit, when you have the chance to go bankrupt. Maybe circling quickly back to my initial question of what do most people get wrong about starting a business in 2025. You covered the topic of financials, and you also said like people don't know really much what they are doing, and I found it kind of interesting because Alex Ramosi, the owner of acquisition.com, which is a portfolio which does around 250 million revenue per year, he said something like, if you get into entrepreneurship, you want to pay down your ignorance debt as fast as possible. What are your thoughts on that, hearing this?
Well, that's the idea of being less ignorant of business as you go on is very good advice. You want to eliminate your ignorance as much as possible. I think most people who start businesses, they're essentially salespeople. They look at a group of a market. I mean, what is a business? A business is a person or a group of people um, who make something that other people want, and other people they want it enough that they're willing to pay you for it. In fact, they're willing to pay you more than it costs you to create something. That is profit. In effect, profit is the applause that your customers give to you. They say this product or this service is worth more to us than it costs you to people don't think of that when they start the business. They think about who needs what product or service they're going to create and who needs it and who's willing to pay the money for it. And if that's all you go into business, that's fine. That's the way to start. You have to, business gets complicated very quickly. And you have to you have to understand uh, how the money that people are giving you, how to spend that in a way that allows you to have enough money to stay in business.
Got it. So and then if we go a little bit deeper into the financials, what are some of the maybe metrics to keep an eye on early on? Like some people in the startup world, they say like stuff like, okay, you need to know how much revenue you get. You need maybe to know how's your churn and how much money you're burning in case you're raising money. But there are also wonderful companies that are not raising money. Do you have some metrics in mind that come to mind?
Well, it's basically it's pretty simple. The amount of money that you spend has to be less than the amount of money uh, that you bring in. And you call it, you call it revenue or you can call it sales or whatever you want to call it. Um, it's pretty basic stuff that you have to have enough. You have to have enough cash to be able to pay all the people who are helping you keep that business or produce whatever product or service you're offering. And you have to figure out how to pay them enough money and in time that they keep providing you with the services or the products that you need in order to stay in business. If you stop paying them, they stop providing those services or products, and pretty soon you go out of business. But it's really very, in principle, it's very simple. It can get complicated based on because of the specific business that you may be in. Um, as I said, we talk about the lemonade stand because kids like to set up a lemonade stand. And often that's their first experience of business, and they sell lemonade to people who walk by. Well, the essentials of the lemonade stand are the same as they are for any other business. Um, you've got to have enough money. You have to have people pay you enough money to be able to buy your lemons and your sugar and whatever else you need to make the lemonade. Well, that's essentially the same thing that has to happen when you build a rocket or you um, you know create software or whatever. Uh, so that's the way it is.
I love that example, like starting selling lemonades as a child, for instance. Now, I'm actually curious. You've spoken to dozens and dozens of exceptional entrepreneurs across the course of writing your books.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to start a business in 2025, based on all that experience you got it over the past decades, what kind of business would you start, Bo?
Well, I would start with what I know how to do. Basically, what I know how to do is right. And so I would, you know, if there was something else that I knew how to do that other people wanted, I might do that for them. Basically, I've spent my whole career, which is a long period at this point, writing. I never planned to write. It was just the one way that I could uh, earn a living and support a family, and that people were willing to pay me money for what I did. That is how, that is how I survived, and that is how I supported my family for many, many years. In terms of, there's nothing that I know right now, it, that I can see right now, is that there is a market for, that there are people who are dying to have something that doesn't exist, and therefore I can create it for something other than writing. I don't see something else that I can create for them, or that I'm any good at creating for them. I mean, I love music, I love art, but I am not a musician, and I don't consider what I do artistic. I do what I know how to do, and people think that I do it well enough that they're willing to pay me for it, and I'm happy. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to them, and I'm grateful that I'm able to keep doing that for as long as I have and as long as I'm able to.
And I think we are very grateful that you published so many great books. Definitely.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Never get tired of hearing that from other people.
Oh,
In fact, that is the greatest reward that I can have for my writing, is that people tell me that some book that I've written has helped them. I've gone out and I've done the research and I've put it all together, and they've gotten some use out of it that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
yeah. I found that. So basically, what you're saying is you would focus on what you're good at. And I found that also an interesting, like, if we watch it from a perspective of where do I start when getting into entrepreneurship? Because sometimes people struggle a little bit with finding something like, where should I start? And then I came across this framework with the 3 Ps, like you either opt for your passion, you have a passion about something, like in your case it's writing, or the second P is your past experience. Maybe you've worked in a job, you gained experience, or you have done maybe a hobby and you gained experience there. Or the third P is your profession. So you worked in a job and you maybe identify a problem to solve, and then you get into entrepreneurship. Do you have maybe some thoughts on that? And do you see what kind of approaches have you seen in the past, maybe?
Well, first, let me correct you. I do not have a passion for writing.
Okay.
Writing is for me a way of earning a living. I actually hate writing. I enjoy doing the research for what I do. That's a lot of fun, talking to other people and learning from them something. And I enjoy it when I'm all done and people tell me if how what I've written has helped them. But in between doing the research and um, and having the finished product, there's this thing that happens when you start with, well, I would say a blank piece of paper, but it's not. No, nobody uses paper anymore. So a blank screen, and there's nothing on it, and you've got to make up the words that in order to explain whatever it is that you're writing about. I find that very hard to do. It's very hard work. I, but I do it because it's something that I know how to do, and people are willing to pay me for it. It's as simple as that. Now, what are the other P's? The one was passion. We can cross that off.
Yeah, yes. Maybe I found it very interesting now what you said about you actually hate writing. Why is that? Is it to get over that initial hump of you have this blank piece of paper, quote unquote, or is that
Well,
such a pain? Or
any writer will tell you that the hardest thing and the most important thing is the first paragraph. It's because basically what you have to do is that you imagine somebody reading that, and you have to interest them enough at the first paragraph that they're willing to read the second paragraph, and so forth. You have to write things that people want to read, otherwise they won't pay you for your efforts. And that is often getting started with a project, whether it's an article or a book or anything is getting started writing the first words to get people's attention is the hardest part. And once you've gotten that, you can sort of figure out what you need to say afterwards as the second thing and the third thing and so forth. And it's it can be very difficult to do. But it's something that you have to learn how to do. I don't know if that. What was the question you asked me, Nicole? Wait a minute, you don't seem to be
Yeah,
there anymore.
basically,
Are
I
you
wanted
still
to
there?
ask you why you hate writing, but that answers it
What's
perfectly.
happened? There.
Yeah, I guess the connection was quickly on sale, but
Wait,
now
no.
we are back. Yeah, all
Okay.
right. So we talked a bit about why it's difficult to get started writing. We talked also about those three P's. We talked about passion, and the second one,
What
and
what were the other P's
yeah,
besides passion?
yeah. The second P is past experience. From any kind of, maybe you're into the gym world, so you have their experience. That could be
Yeah.
a starting point. And the third one is profession. So you worked on a job and you have maybe seen there is a lot of things done in Excel, and then you start maybe a software company and replacing this Excel with a software.
That is basically being in that profession allows you to identify the opportunities that other people, whatever profession you're in, you see what other people want that they aren't getting, and you think you could provide it to them. If the second P is
Yeah,
well, what's the second
past ex-
P?
past
Past
experience.
experience. Well, again, it all comes down to, it's all very simple. It all comes down to identifying something that you can do that other people want and that other people are willing to pay you for. They want it so much that they're willing to pay you uh, for whatever it is that you're going to create. You know, uh, that's really it's really that simple. You know, the passion, you may have a passion for something. Uh, there's different kinds of passion that some people have. I have passion for certain things that nobody would be willing to pay me for. Um, from the outside looking in, you can say that this entrepreneur or that entrepreneur got into this business because they had that experience or because they had been in that profession and so forth. But ultimately, still, if you're going to start a business, nothing, there's a saying that nothing happens without a sale. It's a common expression in the United States, at any rate. Nothing happens without a sale. And that means that there is no business without creating something that can then be sold. That everything else is happens after you made the sale or in order to make the sale.
Interesting. Okay, okay. So major point is sales. I want to quickly share something with you, Bo. So I first discovered your book Small Giants a few years ago. I
Oh,
think it was around 2021 or 2022. And it was after watching a video from Tim Ferriss. He's the author
oh
of
yeah,
the 4 Hour Workweek.
yeah, I
Presumably, you
know,
know him.
I know.
He had this video, How to Start a Business or Podcast from Scratch. And he recommended your book. So I picked up the copy, I read it, took notes, and very much loved it. Now, that got me wondering, did you ever have any connections with Tim Ferriss back then?
I had connection with Tim Ferriss a very, very long time ago, which is that he was a student at Princeton University, which is where I went to school, and he was thinking of writing a book, and he needed advice about what to do, and so he contacted me and asked me for advice about how to do various things. And the next thing I know, he wrote this book, which is this huge bestseller, and that I was sort of taken aback that he was as successful as he was. I mean, I admire his success, and I admire him for what he's been able to do. Um, the fact that he liked Small Giants is of great uh, interest and importance to me because there are people like you who read Small Giants because Tim Ferriss tells them it's a good book and that they should read it. And I'm very grateful for that.
Interesting. Okay. By the way, what did he ask you?
I don't remember. All I know is that he contacted me and he wanted to talk to me, and I was happy to talk to him in any way and answer whatever questions he had. But exactly what questions he had or how I contributed, which is a mystery to me. I have no idea how I contributed. But he, he wrote uh, the book, and uh, uh, and I'm glad that he's been as successful as he has.
Yeah, I'm sure your advice contributed definitely. Like the success was huge with 4 Hour Work Week, that's for
Well,
sure.
well, I hope so. I certainly hope so.
Cool, cool, interesting. I was wondering, Bo, I'm sure you're also you're having a look at what companies are around, what companies are good at what they do. What companies have you seen in the perhaps past 5 years ish that managed to keep their mojo, their charisma, and are there any you think have lost it over the past years?
Well, I just came last week. We had a meeting of what's called the Small Giants community. It was formed after I wrote my book. A number of people wrote, read the book and thought that the companies that I described in the book, that was what they wanted to achieve in their companies. Various people told me that there was an opportunity, there was a business opportunity to form under some sort of organization that allowed these companies to get in touch with each other because they had no way to, other than circumstance, luck of running into any other company that had a similar experience. I said, look, I'm a journalist. I'm not an entrepreneur, and I, I, I'm not sure I would be a very good entrepreneur. But if one of the people who talked to me about the importance of having such an organization was a fellow named Paul Spiegelman, and Paul said to me, that I really should start something that allowed people to contact each other. I said, um, I, I said that involves starting an organization, and that requires an entrepreneur who knows how not only to start the organization, but to make money at it that allows it to sustain itself. And I've never done that, and I'm not sure I'd be any good at that. But I said to him, if you want to do it, I will support you. I mean, I'm happy to help you however I can. And he said, well, if that's the case, he said he would be happy to start such an organization. So he began with my support the Small Giants community, and that was, I don't know how many years ago, at least 15, 16 years ago. And every year, and he did have the ability, he did understand, he had the financial resources in order to support this organization going forward. He also knew that he eventually had to set up various things that allowed the organization to have some revenue so that it could sustain itself. It wouldn't be dependent on his contributions. And he was able to do that. He set up a leadership academy, which people pay money in order to learn about Small Giants. He set up a mentoring program in which people are paired with mentors who help them. and he had the summit where people pay in order to attend the summit and meet other people who have that urge to build a company that is similar. Well, it has the same characteristics as the ones I wrote about in the book, Small Giants. And we've been having it for year after year, and we had one last week in Detroit, Michigan. And it had a pretty good turnout. It had about 150 people, 150 companies. People love it. So, and there are other people who are doing it. I don't have anything other than showing up and, saying hello to people and making contact with some of these people. I really don't have much to do with it.
You had the heavy lift with writing the book, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. It has a momentum of its own, and it goes by itself right now. Not through my efforts, and not through any more efforts, because I don't put much efforts into it. It's so far it's been successful. I mean, if you go online and look for the Small Giants community, on LinkedIn or some other online platform, you'll see lots of people talk about what a wonderful experience they had going to this conference, and I'm glad that that's the case. It's really that the book has attracted people who have uh, a lot to teach each other and a lot to help each other with. That's good. That's something that I'm very happy is happening.
So people not only have the book to read, but also to connect with other people through your small giant community.
Exactly. Yes, that's true.
I'm also curious, Bo. Now you have mentioned before you got a lot of exposure to entrepreneurs. Is there a story from all those conversations that you find yourself telling again and again? Maybe because it's insightful, or maybe you just because it's a good one. Do you have any stories that really
Well,
stuck with you?
there's one story. The first book I wrote was a book that I wrote with a fellow named Jack Stack, and it was called The Great Game of Business, and it was about a system that he had developed at his company that basically, well, subsequently it was given the name Open Book Management. But basically, what he believed that he could teach everybody in the business the best way to run the business and the best way to keep it going was to teach everybody how the business operated, how the business made money, what role they played, what role each person played in making the business successful. And that also led to an organization that I'm involved with called the Great Game of Business that is about open book management and also has a conference every year that attracts lots of people too. But I often tell the story of how Jack and his colleagues at Springfield Remanufacturing managed to uh, start this business that at the time he started it, it was a relatively small business. It was part of a bigger business on International Harvester, which was one of the largest companies in the world, but it got into lots of trouble. And as a spin-off, basically a group of managers at this one factory that was owned by International Harvester decided that they would buy the company and keep it running themselves. And they did it through this method called the Great Game of Business, teaching everybody the business. So I tell that story over and over again. It's a well-known story at this point. It is the system that Jack Stack has developed at Springfield Remanufacturing is the most powerful business system, the business technique that I have ever seen in all my years of writing about business and writing about entrepreneurship. By far, if somebody asked me what was the best way for them to be successful over the long term and build a successful company, I would encourage them to practice the principles that are involved in the great game of business, because any company that uses the intelligence and the of all the people who work for that company in order to be successful is going to be, if there are, if you have two companies of 100 people, and in one company, uh, you have 5 or 6 people at the top who are telling the other people what to do, and in the other company, you have 100 people who all understand what needs to be done in order to be successful. Which company is going to be more successful? Clearly, the company with 100 business people running and trying to make it successful, rather than the other company which has 5 or 6 people who are trying to run the company and make it successful. And so it's that is the story that I try to tell people, because it is of the greatest help to most people who are running companies. People get intimidated by it, and so forth. I say it's not easy to do. It requires a lot of work on your part in order to do it, and you shouldn't do it unless you believe in it. Excuse me. But if you put the work in and you are able to teach the other people you work with how the business works, and if you're able to work together to make money and generate cash, you'll be much, much more successful.
Wasn't it Jack that got his employees to read and understand the income statement?
Yes, exactly. That's open in both that's open book management. It's not only that they read the income statement, but they know what the income statement is for and why it's important and how it changes over the course of the year based on how successful they are at doing what they need to do in order for the business to be successful. Now, the income statement, he also teaches people what a balance sheet is, because a balance sheet, it gives them a point in time uh, that measures the value of what they've created, uh, and they can compare that to another point in time and the um, see the progress that they're making. And the third statement is the cash flow statement, which links really the two of them together. But the point is that people that that in order to in order to once a business is above a certain size, in order to understand what's going on in that business, you need to know what the numbers. You need to understand the numbers. It's like, well, as we say in the great game business, it's like any sport. I mean, think of a sport that you don't know or you don't understand, like cricket, for example. Well, in order to understand that you need to know what the rules are. You need to get enough information to follow the action and keep score, and you need to care about whether or not you win or you lose. And those are the same 3 elements that are involved in a business. Know what the rules are, uh, get enough information to follow action and keep score, care about whether or not you win or you lose. And that's basically how it works.
Very interesting. That's a great one. Okay. Now, I want to maybe go a little bit deep in. So, in Small Giants, you also covered the story of Clif Bar, the
Right.
company that makes those energy bars. I've seen them
Right.
also in Switzerland. I think
Yeah.
since recent years they're here as well.
Yeah.
Have you followed their journey since then? Like, what's happened since you covered them in your book, and how do you look at their development today?
Well, it's funny that you should ask that question. I mean, in my book, I talk about how they decided not to accept um, an offer to buy the company because they intended to keep growing the company. and they thought they had an opportunity to grow the company without being owned by somebody else. And that's exactly what they did. And they grew the company and it got more and more successful. And eventually, the two owners, Gary Erickson, well, by then they had included the employees as participants in the ownership, but the two main owners were Gary Erickson and his wife, Kit Crawford. They received an offer from this huge international candy company, basically Mendelez, and that company offered them billions of dollars in order to buy the company, and that was more than they were willing to turn down. And so they did in fact sell the company for a lot more money than they would have got than they turned down initially.
Okay, so finally, eventually they sold the company, right?
Yeah, it's not true of all of them. It's not true of all the companies in but the small giants. When I wrote the book originally, it was at a moment in time. It looked at these companies at a moment in time. Very soon afterwards, the world doesn't stop because you capture what these companies are doing at a moment in time. Their life continues, and one thing that happens when in life is that they change, and the companies change. And I saw that. I saw that companies are changing, and there were enough changes among the companies that I had written about that I thought I had to in order to give a realistic appraisal of these different companies, I needed to about that and about happened. And so I went to my publisher and I said, we have to do another edition of this book, 10th anniversary edition, that talks about how these companies change and how some of them, frankly, might go out of business. And the publisher said, okay. And so I rewrote. I added 2 chapters and include yeah, their 10th anniversary edition. That's the one I tell people to read. Don't read the first edition of this. Read the 10th anniversary edition. You'll learn a lot more.
You see more the development over all these years. Okay, okay. You, may both you. What I found in your basically story, your CV more or less, that in the 90s you spent 5 years on the board of the Body Shop's U.S. arm, the skincare and cosmetic company.
That's true.
What were some of the biggest lessons you took from that experience, and how did they lose their mojo? Because you once talked about that in a Google speech you gave.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Unfortunately, there's a long answer to it that it takes more time than we have. Uh, but basically, I was on the board, and the 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 uh, the body shop was the opposite of SRC. It was uh, it was totally closed. There was nobody knew. Anita Roddick, who's the founder herself, didn't know how much, because they tried to uh, keep anybody from knowing how much it cost to create the products that they had because they didn't want their franchisees to find out about it. And as a result, they were not strong in that way. And eventually they were having trouble, and they were eventually sold to L'Oreal. I think, um, and things happened that Anita Roddick never wanted to have happen, but inevitably did happen because of certain decisions that they made that deprived them of their mojo and also made it possible, made the changes inevitable.
Mhm.
I'm going to have to wrap this up.
Yep.
Can we do that? Because I have to move on.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. May I ask you a last question, Bo? Is that fine
Yeah.
for you? It's rather a personal question. I found it remarkably beautiful that you're married for 55 years
Yes.
with Lisa. Could you
Yes.
share maybe some things that helped your marriage to thrive over all these years? I'm actually curious because I also want to get a 1 point merit. I'm learning from successful people as you are.
Well, the first thing that happened was at the beginning of our marriage, we went through a very intense period where we might have been broken up and we might not have see each other forever. And we sort of battled our way through that. And that solidified the relationship. And also, we were honest with each other. Fundamentally, there were certain qualities about each other, qualities about my wife that I am deeply in love with and can hardly imagine living without. I would like to say that that same is true of her, but I don't know it for a fact. For whatever reason, she's decided to stay married to me this entire time. And I think that we have our ups and downs like everybody else. And but basically we work things out among ourselves, between ourselves, and we have two children and we have four grandchildren, and that helps to bind us together as well. So I would say that we started out with a very strong foundation um, to our relationship that we knew that if we stayed together during that, it must be because we had some very fundamental reasons to love each other, and we've managed to maintain that over many years. I mean, love changes like business. Love changes over time. You know, what you experience when you're your age and you have a relationship with somebody else and that experience doesn't last forever. The question is whether or not a more mature uh, relationship develops out of that, and whether, given the inevitable bumps in the road that you definitely will run into, if you are you able to continue the feelings that you have for each other strong enough that allow you to continue through those challenges that you will inevitably face as time goes along. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but
Definitely, it's very inspiring. Thanks, Bo,
uh,
for sharing that. And maybe to respect your time, one last thing: where can people find you online? And I heard you will publish a new book. What's next for you, Bo?
well, we there. It's funny that you asked. I wrote a book with the founder of another group called the Tugboat Institute, which is about his life and about his discovery of a type of business that had not been recognized in the United States at any rate. Maybe it is more well known. Maybe it's different in Europe, but in the United States, this is a company that is private, not publicly owned. It's private owned. In most cases, it's family businesses that have gone on for a long, long time. There's one company uh, in this group who has probably been around for 300 years or 250 years. Longer than the United States has been around. And how he discovered this group, this type of business, and began promoting it, and his whole experience over his life is the subject of the book. The name of the book is Another Way: Building Companies to Last and Last and Last. And its official publication date is tomorrow, believe it or not, May
Really?
6th. And that's what was the other question you asked me?
Where can people find you online? Or
People easy to find online at if you look for boburlingham.com, you will find a website that is associated with me, and then if you write to Bo at boburlingham.com, you'll wind up contacting me. Please, I would say to please remind me if you heard about this over Nicola's webcast, please remind me that that's where you found out about it because it will allow me to position you and respond to you in a way that's more knowledgeable. Um,
very
so
much looking forward to grab a copy of that book. Sure.
okay, very
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
Nicola, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much. And good luck with you, and good luck with your podcast.